أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وارزقنا فهم النبيين وحفظ المرسلين اللهم افتح إلينا حكمتك وانشر علينا رحمتك يا ذا الجلال والإكرام وصل اللهم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله الكرام ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome everyone. I think today is our 6th session if I'm not mistaken with the count, and I want to go over a couple of things before we proceed with the texts. Actually, one thing before we proceed with the text, the other thing will come in halfway through the text, inshallah. So, following last week's session, there was a bit that I had missed out, and it's part of a. Can you share the slide, inshallah? Okay, so that's the. Can everyone see that? Hopefully, everyone can see that, inshallah. Now, okay, so if you look at this, we talked about the nafs last week, and this is my own rendering. So there are different kinds of nafs, essentially. Out of these that you see here in the Arabic, 3 of them are mentioned in the Quran. I'm not going to tell you where, that's your homework to find out where they're mentioned and the context in which they have been mentioned and elaborated. If you look, the centermost there, that's nafs al-kamila. Kamila means to be complete. So this is the soul that is complete in all its attributes, in all its qualities, and it is at one and at peace with the divine presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's nafs al-kamila. And that's essentially the best example of that kind of nafs is the nafs or the soul of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The prophetic spirit, you would say, is such a kind of soul. It is at peace with the divine presence. In the outermost region there, you see nafs al-ammara bisu. This is the soul that is capitulating to evil. It is the soul that gives in to evil and gets completely entrenched or engulfed by evil. Then you've got nafs al-lawama, which is essentially where a majority of human souls are. The vast majority of the human beings are in this stage, nafs al-lawama. This is the soul that is always bouncing back and forth. So, if you look at nafs al-ammara bisu and you follow that line up until where it says the damned, this is essentially the lifeline of that soul. So we'll talk about this a little more inshallah when we come to Imam al-Haddad's book, and we will then talk about the concept of death. So there is the death which is a bodily death, and then you can also experience a spiritual death while you're alive. That's the soul that is nafs al-ammara bisu. In its continuum of existence, if it remains in that state for too long, it dies a spiritual death. It becomes so capitulated to evil that it is fully entrained in the material realm. It's not ascending at all. It's not even imbibing its own spiritual qualities. And these are the people who are in a state of heedlessness and ignorance. The jahil, who is the ignorant, and then the ghafil, who is in a state of heedlessness. Heedlessness means that they are disassociated from a spiritual reality, from true reality. And a little bit further ahead, there's another chart I'm going to bring out. I'll explain that a little bit more in detail. So most of us are in a state of nafs al-lawama. So if you follow that line, you see it goes up until the self-condemning soul. And it's a soul that is in a state of turbulence and turmoil, because it's the soul that is constantly shifting between this side of divinity and this other side of evil. So you commit a sin and then you sort of feel guilty about it. It's the soul that feels the guilt. It's the soul that feels the remorse. It is the soul that is turbulating between these two and is always trying to seek out some sort of a resolution. This is when, now, if the soul is sincere in its pursuit, in its seeking, it will be given inspiration by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So every soul, Ghazali will talk about this later, every human being is privy to divine inspirations that come into the individual's heart. Every individual, every human being, no one is cut off from that. It is a haqq that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given the human being. So everyone will experience this inspiration, and it will come in some shape, form or another. It may come through someone you know, it may come through somebody who is a complete stranger you meet in the street. It may come through anything you might see in reality that just sort of, triggers this thought. When people say, oh, I had an epiphany, that's basically what it is. So if it is inspired, if it allows or accepts that inspiration, because many people will get this and then they'll just ignore it, or they deny it, or they'll just run off from it, or they'll forget about it. See, like Winston Churchill said, everyone stumbles upon the truth, but then most of us just pick ourselves up, dust off our clothes and keep moving. We completely ignore it, right? So if you ignore it, then you'll fall back on the other side towards nafs al-lawama and then further into sin. And this is ideal. The human being, the free will is not a choice between good and evil in Islam. In Islam, it is to choose to do good. That's what khayr means. Khayara yukhayyiru is to choose to do good, and the other side of it is to capitulate to evil. So being free is to do good. That's what freedom entails. And then imprisonment, which is its opposite, means that you have capitulated and become enslaved by your vices and the demonic influences that come upon you. So that's the soul. Nafs al-mulhama is the soul that is inspired. When it is inspired now, it now takes on this longer curve that goes all the way down to the bottom. But you can see it is not complete yet. It doesn't go through its whole cycle, because just being inspired alone is not enough. You may be inspired and you have this inspirational thought, but you don't act on it. It comes to you by way of knowledge, by way of seeing something that you want to replicate, something good, but you don't actually act on it. Then essentially that also, the life of it starts getting cut off. And then you have an-nafs al-mutma'innah. And an-nafs al-mutma'innah is the soul that is now tranquil. It is moved from the turbulence of back and forth. It is now in a state of tranquil. This is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ala bi dhikrillahi tatma'innul qulub. It's by the dhikr of Allah, by remembering your Lord Almighty, do the hearts find tranquility. It's from the same root word, tam'ana, which is the same root word for al-mutma'inna and tatma'inna, right? So this is the soul now. From this junction is where there is a further derivation from that. You can see nafs al-radiya and nafs al-mardiya. And this is like two aspects of that same soul. The one aspect is that the soul is pleased with itself and what it has achieved now. The fact that it has achieved this tranquility through this struggle and strive, acting on that inspiration. So collectively for humankind, the collective inspiration is the inspiration sent down as a tanzil to the Prophet ﷺ, which is the revelation. That's the collective inspiration. And many people will, they wouldn't be Muslim, but then they'll attempt to read the Quran in whatever language they're able to, and they will get this inspiration to see this is actually the truth. You see? And so when they act on that now, when they start, this is where the struggle actually begins. At the stage of mulhama is where the struggle actually begins now. This is where the real test lies. The constant struggling and strife in deen, in religion, will now enable this soul to be pleased with itself, and then also be a nafs al-mardiyah. It is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and pleasing to others. So your presence among others is pleasing to them, but then ultimately, because of your actions, your deeds, and your spiritual embodiment, it is also pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as you complete your cycle of life and you maintain that status, that position of a nafs al-mutma'inna, then you become a nafs al-kamila. This is why he then says, I'm not going to tell you where it is in the Quran. This is for you to figure out. This is your homework, inshallah. To look up these three and to understand the context in which they have been applied. An-nafs al-ammara bis-su', an-nafs al-mutma'inna, and an-nafs al-lawama. These three are mentioned in the Quran. The other are derivatives of that. So an-nafs al-kamila is a derivative of an-nafs al-mutma'inna. Same as an-nafs al-radiya and an-nafs al-mardiya. And then an-nafs al-mulhama is a derivative of an-nafs al-lawama. So these three you will find in the Quran. This is your homework to go in and now examine. Examine the context in which these were defined or they were mentioned. You'll find them in three different places, inshallah. I know I've actually just rushed through this, but this will be, when we go along with the text, you will begin to understand these different classifications. If you have any questions, inshallah, hold on to them, and we'll come to it at the end of the session now. So let's proceed with the text. You can stop sharing that. So the section now, we finished the section on how to know yourself. This section is ma haqiqatul qalb, what's the reality of the heart. So he says, amma su'aluk, ma haqiqatul qalb. So as for your asking now, what is the reality of the heart? فَلَمْ يَجِئُوا فِي الشَّرِيعَةِ أَكْثَرَ مِنْ قَوْلِ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الرُّوحِ قُلِ الرُّوحُ مِنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّي. Because he mentioned in the previous section that the heart is a spiritual entity. So naturally we will be looking for the spirit. If the heart is a spiritual entity, then its reality has to do with the spirit, with a ruh. But this is a very difficult thing to understand. And in fact, it is close to prohibitory to even try to understand it, or to try and, because it's not something you can study scientifically. You can't, harness a sample of a spirit and then break it down in a lab to understand what is its composition, what is it made of. And this is also in the Quran, that the heart, the spirit, is from the amr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we have been given very little knowledge as far as it's concerned. Enough only to make us realize that there is such a thing as a spirit. But what it really is, what it's made of, how it does whatever it does, all these things this is unknowable, because the ciencia, the methodology that the human being will apply into studying things, is limited to this world. The ciencia is limited to this world. Science runs on three principles. The Western world only recognizes two principles, but science in essence runs on three principles. The two that the Western world look at is observation and then experimentation. You observe something, you theorize about it, and then you experiment to yield some results in order to authenticate your theorization. The first principle on top of that is assumption. It always begins with an assumption. I wonder what it is, and then you observe it, right? This is limited to this outward world because the observation can only be done with the senses. Now, you can't see the spirit. You can't hold it. You can't quantify it. You can't put it in a bottle. You can't do anything of such sorts in order to apply an observation on it as well as then an experimentation on it. It is part of the spiritual realm. So you cannot come to know of it using the same rationale that you would know other things. And the same is true for the soul or consciousness or the will. These are things that their understandings come through philosophical inquiry, through rational, not rational, I would say, reason. It'll come through qiyas. It doesn't come through the what and how of things, which is the ciencia. It comes through the why of things. Min al-ma'lum ila al-majhul. You're going into the unknown aspect now, into the ghaibi aspect of reality. So he says, لِأَنَّ الرُّوحَ مِنْ جُمْلَةِ الْقَدْرَةِ الْإِلَهِيَّةِ, because the ruh is from the collective of the divine power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَهُوَ مِنْ عَالَمَ الْأَمْرِ, and it is from the alam al-amr. It's not from this observable realm. قال الله عز وجل ألا له الخلق والأمر. To him belong the khalq and the amr. So let's go back to the slideshow, and I'll introduce now the second thing that I wanted to discuss, because I want you to understand how these worlds, how these realms come together. What's the essential cosmology of Islam as far as these are concerned. Okay, so you can see that the alameen, these are the realms. Now I've just spread them into two general categories, but that's not necessarily how it is represented. It's just for you to get an idea of how to distinguish that which is outward and that which is inward, right? So you can see that there is mulk and then there is malakut. So the mulk is this domain, this one aspect which is outwardly. This is the mulk, and then preceding that is the malakut, which is the spiritual realm. So it's like the ard and then the samawat. As you can see down there at the bottom, there is al-ard and then there is as-samawat. So the mulk is the al-ard, and then the malakut, these are the samawat. And then you have, where is my line? Okay. Then you have alam al-turab and then alam al-arwah. Alam al-turab is the realm of matter, of material. Turab also means soil. And the Latin word terra originates from this Arabic word turab. The terra, which is dirt, it's soil, it's matter or it's material. If you look in the English origin of the word earth, which comes from Old English Midgard, it means the material abode. It's very strange. In the contemporary world today, this word has been, it's sort of meant to make you believe that when you say earth, it only means the planet Earth. And this is part of their reductionist mannerism of just reducing everything to something that seems insignificant. It's just one planet that you're on in the middle of some galaxy or some solar system that it's got no direction whatsoever. It's just going around and around in circles. It's an insignificant thing. But turab means material and matter. So this world here, this is the world of matter. And then you've got the world of spirit, or the spirits now. This is the spiritual realm. So the material realm and then the spiritual realm. Alam al-turab, alam al-arwah. Then you've got alam al-ashkal and alam al-mithal. We'll talk about this a little more when we come to the section on dreams. This is more to do with dreams. So ashkal are the forms. The shakal, right, is the thing that what it looks like. So there's a form or there's a shape. It has a sort of a structure. That's the shakal of a thing, ashkal. And then mithal is what is its meaning now. What is its inner aspect, because the form represents meaning. See, so you've got the realm in which there are forms existent, and then another realm which is unseen, which is where you get the meaning. Because you can't show somebody meaning. I can't show you, like if I'm to hold up an object, I can only show you the object. I can't show you its meaning. Its meaning is something that you will abstract from it if you know it. And if you don't know it, I will give you words which are symbols. We'll come to the section on dreams, you'll understand this better. The symbol is what enables you to abstract its meaning. And so now you have, if you look now, alam al-khalq and then alam al-amr. So this is the khalq, this is the created form. And then preceding it is the amr that drives the created form, that gives it its directive on what to do, how to do, when to do, all these things. So you've got the zahir and then you've got the batin, the exoteric and then the esoteric, the outward and then the inward. That's ard and as-samawat. And then you've got waqi'iyah, and then you've got haqiqa. So waqi'iyah is, haqiqa is true reality. So that's the true reality. The malakut, the arwah, the ghaib, the amthal, the amr, the batin or batina, the samawat, and these are all the true realities of things. What is outwardly represented is just a representation of that. That's waqi'iyah. In English, that would be realistic. It's not reality itself. It's not real. It's realistic. It's representing the real. That is astaghfirullah. That is waqi'iyah. This is the distinction between the two. So this is what he says. لأن الروح من جملة القدرة الإلهية. This ru'h, the ruh, is from the collective of Allah's divine power. And it is from وهو من عالم الأمر, and it is from the عالم الأمر. قال الله عز وجل ألا له الخلق والأمر. Now this is very important because this is an axiom in the Quran. They both belong to Him. They are both His creation, but you have to distinguish between the created form and then the created ordinance. Okay? And قُلِ الرُّوحُ مِنْ أَمْرِ رَبِّي. It is from the amr of Allah. It's not from Allah. This is part of Aqidah, and it's a very sophisticated argument. And it's one of the things that led a lot of people astray because they started trying to comprehend the concept of qadr. You know, they're trying to rationalize qadr, which is something that you can't really rationalize. And they start saying, all these unseen things are now they're directly from Allah, which led them now along a different path of thinking. فَالْإِنسَانُ مِنْ عَالَمَ الْخَلْقِ مِنْ جَانِبٍ وَمِنْ عَالَمَ الْأَمْرِ مِنْ جَانِبٍ. So the human being is in one aspect from عَالَمَ الْخَلْقِ, and then in the other aspect from عَالَمَ الْأَمْرِ. You have got your physical form, and then you've got that which gives the form its function. And form always follows function. It's not the other way around. Function does not follow form. Form always follows function. Al-ma'ani qabla al-mabani. The meaning comes before the construct of it, the building of it, the form of it. So anything that you see in reality that has got a certain shape or a form or whatever it has, it's like that because of what function it fulfills. You don't make something and then give it its purpose. You conceptualize the purpose first, and then you build it and you make it to fit that purpose. So even as far as your body is concerned, your organs are concerned, see, this is what, when you examine all these scientific theories that come out from this Western, this secular side about evolution and all these things, these things, they turn the human being into an insignificant entity. Because there's no functionality as far as they will argue, then they say there's no function, there's no purpose to the human being. You know, you're just there, you took an existing form, and then, you know, because of random selection and all these things, you developed thumbs and you developed this and you developed that and blah, blah, blah. And you're just here just to go through it and then you die and finish. But there is a purpose why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has designed you the way you are. And you'll understand, inshallah, when we go along with the text. فَكُلُّ شَيْءٍ يَجُوزُ عَلَيْهِ الْمِسَاحَةُ وَالْمِقْدَارُ وَالْكَيْفِيَّةُ فَهُوَ مِنْ عَالَمِ الْخَلْقِ. He's only mentioning 3 basic principles, but there are many other principles as far as عَالَمَ الْخَلْقِ is concerned. He's saying that anything that can occupy space, that has you can measure it, and you can determine the process in which it comes to be, or whatever process it takes on. Al-masahatu wal-taqdir wal-miqdaru wal-kayfiyatu. Anything that occupies space can be measured or has an howness to it, a process by which it does things. Physical process. It starts from, let's say, like for the body, for example, it starts from a clot, and then it becomes this, and then it becomes that, and then the fetus, and then it comes out, and then the baby and the infant, and so there's a growth process. So the body is from alam al-khalq, because it fulfills that. It has a how-ness to it, right? It occupies space, meaning you can measure its volume. You can determine its volume. It has other units of measure. You can determine its mass or its density. As far as this physical world is concerned, then it is a physical entity. وَلَيْسَ لِلْقَلْبُ مِسَاحَةٌ وَلَا مِقْدَارٌ. But the spiritual heart, it doesn't occupy space, because where is it? Where's the spiritual heart? You cut the physical body open and show me the spiritual heart. And yet it's there. Even the atheists cannot deny it. They'll try and cover it up and say this, that and the other. Even the secularists, they can't deny it. They'll cover it up this way, that way. But what do they do when they fall in love? My heart beats for you. Why is it your heart beating? They can't explain that. I feel sad. Why are you feeling sad? Isn't your brain just a function of chemical whatevers? Take a pill and get the sadness removed. They can't deny it, it's there. Because that's a truth, you can't deny truth. They'll try and cover it up, but it's still there. The spiritual heart, where is it? Consciousness, where is it? Why are we able to affirm things and negate things? Why are we able to understand and comprehend things? Where are all these things? These are part of Alam al-Amr. They don't occupy space, they cannot be divided, they cannot be measured. There's no unit of measure, how many centimeters it is. or what's its weight. وَلِهَذَا لَا يُقْبَلُ الْقِسْمَةِ. It cannot be divided. You can't cut it open and then break it down into, molecules and then atoms and then particles and quantum particles. And you can't do all that with the spiritual heart. You can do it with the body, yes. And this is why I say also, this new age movement, especially, I've seen Muslims do this. They start talking about the quantum realm and they think, oh, this is unseen, it's ghaib. Now we can access the ghaib now. It's not. It's part of alam al-khalq. The quantum realm is part of this physical observable universe. It's what makes the universe at the subatomic level. Because it is observable, whether by the naked eye or through instrumentation. The quantum realm, you can't observe it by the naked eye, but you can observe it through instrumentation. And so long as you can observe it, because the instrument itself is made of matter. It's made of the same exact particles that you are observing. It's part of this realm. And this is why you can't classify it as ghaib, or it is unseen. I can see now no. So the spiritual heart, you can't break it down into atoms and subatoms. And this is why there's also this bid to try and quantify consciousness as something to do with quantum, what's the term for it? I forgot. If anyone knows, you can let me know. وَلَوْ قِبَلُ الْقِسْمَ لِكَانَ مِنْ عَالَمَ الْخَلْقِ. If it was divisible, it would be from عَالَمَ الْخَلْقِ. So it's not a physical entity, the spiritual heart. So when we're talking about the heart now, it is not a spiritual entity. وَكَانَ مِنْ جَانِبِ الْجَهْلُ جَاهِلًا وَمِنْ جَانِبِ الْعِلْمُ عَالِمًا وَكُلُّ شَيْءٍ يَكُونُ فِيهِ عِلْمٌ وَجَهْلٌ فَهُوَ مَحَالٌ. It would be like saying that a thing, when it is ignorant, or when it is displaying ignorance, it's an ignorant entity. And then when it is showing knowledge, it is a knowledgeable entity. You can't have knowledge and ignorance in the same capacity. That's impossible. If you know something, you can't be ignorant about it. وَفِي مَعْنَ آخَرٍ. Therefore, in this case, now that we've taken a look at that, to say, okay, is the reality of the heart physical? Is it something you can see? Is it something you can physically interact with? And we have proven that it is not. Therefore, what's the other alternative? Because he said, عَلَى لَهُ الْخَلْقُ وَالْأَمْرِ. If it is not khalq, then it must be from amr. وَفِي مَانَ آخَرٍ هُوَ مِنْ عَالَمَ الْأَمْرِ. And therefore, the other option now in this case is that it is from the عالم الأمر. لأن عالم الأمر عبارة عن شيء من الأشياء لا يكون للمساحة والتقدير طريق إليه. The Alam al-Amr elaborates, elucidates, articulates those things that do not have they do not occupy space or cannot be quantifiably measured. This is where philosophical reasoning comes in. You understand things outside of the scientia of them. You see, there's this sickness that has gripped the modern world, especially Muslims now. Everything needs a dalil. Everything needs proof. Where is your physical, tangible proof? I need to see it literally, word by word, what you're talking about. There are certain things that you cannot get from that perspective. You cannot get from that tangibility of it. They are not quantifiable. And this is why you find 2/3 of the Quran is ayat mutashabiha. It's composed of ayat that require interpretation. They are composed of metaphoric words and phrases because they are elaborating things that cannot be quantified, that cannot be put into measurement. That's what Alam al-Amr entails. The Alam al-Amr enables one, if you venture into it, and everyone does this. Your thoughts are part of Alam al-Amr. Your emotions are part of Alam al-Amr. If you venture into them and you really think things through, apply critical thought, then you will be able to understand those things that do not take physical form. You will then be able to see with your inner eye. Because that's your heart now that is going to do that. It's your heart that is going to look into the Alam al-Amr because that is the realm that it is from. وَقَدْ ظَنَّ بَعْضُهُمْ أَنَّ الرُّوحُ قَدِيمٌ فَغَلَطُوا. And some of the people say that the Ru'h is, and qadimun here means old, like as the dictionary definition means old, but it's also a technical term in philosophy. And he's applying it in that aspect, in its technical form. It means sempiternal, or sempiternal. Sempiternal is something in philosophy that is everlasting but not eternal. It's just everlasting in a temporal space. If you call something immortal, for example, somebody's lived for many thousand years, right? And will continue living until time ends. Basically, was existent when time began, and then will stop existing when time ends. That's like sempiternal. And so they said that the Ru'h is qadim. These were the philosophers. This was the philosophical argument. See, because going through the philosophical argument here, what he has presented, he's given you a line of reasoning. He's given you logic. He's saying, if it's this, then it is this, this and that. It can't be that because this is this. You see, he's given you the logic there. This is how the philosophers reason. So it is not khalq because it can't be divided. It can't be measured, right? So therefore it must be amr. But then they couldn't comprehend the amr, so they didn't understand what the amr really means, the alam al-amr. So they essentially concluded by saying, the ru'h is, as the spirit is basically sempiternal, meaning it's always existed. And this is part of the sickness of the modern world as well, as far as their cosmology goes. Their arguments, many of their arguments are on this assumption. Remember we said science begins with assumption and then observation and then theory. So they've got the assumption. And their assumption is that the universe always existed. And they are hell-bent on trying to prove that. Because if they can prove that, then it helps them prove that because it's always existed, it means it was not created. You see where their deviancy takes them. Because it is always existent, means it was not created. And if it was not created, then there's no need for a creator. So this is how also some of them argued as far as the Ru'h is concerned. But then Allah says what? Ala lahul khalqu wal amr. To him belong the khalq and the amr. So it cannot have been an everlasting thing. It has to be a created entity. It's just not a created entity with a physical form. That's the way to understand it. So this is what they argued, that it's sempiternal, but they were wrong. وَقَالَ قَوْمٌ إِنَّهُ عَرَضٌ. And then other people said, it is an arad. Now, in logic, you've got 5 predicables. I've mentioned this. You've got the jins, the naw'u, the faslu, the aradu, and then the khasu, the khasun. That's the genus, the species, the differentia, the accidental or the event, and then you've got the specific. So the genus is the comprehensive, the whole category. And then in that category you've got the species, the individual. And the way to determine the individual is to differentiate. So you apply the differentia to differentiate the individual from the general category. So if you want to look at the human being, for example, in the outward form you say the human being is from the animal genus because we are animalistic. We are not from the plant kingdom. We are not from the jinn in our physical form. We are not from the stones and the dirt and the pebbles. We are not from the reptilians. We are not from the aquaria, from fish, right? We're from the animal kingdom. But then how do you distinguish that now? How do you arrive at the specific, the human being? Because if you say the human being has legs, well, yeah, animals have legs as well. Okay, the human being has 2 legs. Yeah, some animals have 2 legs as well, like birds, for example. They have 2 legs, right? Or you say the human being has got thumbs. Yeah, monkeys have thumbs as well. What's the difference? So you go through this method of elimination until you arrive at the specific. The human being can speak. Animals can't speak. There's no animal that can talk. They can't speak. So the logicians do this by differentiating it and come to the conclusion, al-hayawan al-natiq, the speaking animal. Human beings can reason, they can intellect. So then they come to another definition or description, al-hayawan al-aqil, the rational animal. Now, the arad comes after all that. Now, once you've determined the species is when now you start examining the arad and the khasa. Arad means accident, but it doesn't mean accident in the colloquial language. Like, you get 2 cars hit and then you say there's an accident. Or you drop something, it was accident. This is a technical term now. The arad is like an effect of it. Something that comes after the form as existent in substance. So the arad is so the best way to describe it is like a color, for example. Color is an accident. Color does not exist by itself. You can't just see this is red. No, you'll be pointing at a specific object that has the color red or that shows red. So if I pick something up and I say, this is black, right? This is black. The color is because of this object. It's not because of it existing by itself. If I say this is brown, it's because of my thobe. That's why it's brown. The thobe exists, therefore the color exists. This is where the argument becomes nullified. Because they said that, or they claimed in this case, that the spirit is an arad. It's an effect of what? Of the body. Meaning that the body is what produced the spirit. And this, if you look very carefully at the language from the secular and the godless world, their language is this language. You see, you can examine this. You will see this in all their superheroes. There's Superman, Batman, and this man and the other man, all those men, and the women as well in there. The way they present their ideology as far as this supernatural aspect is concerned is that the supernatural power that the individual has is as a result of a physical body, a mutation of sorts or some sort of chemical thing that went wrong somewhere. It's a product of the body. It's an arad, the way they define it. That's what they classify as the spirit of the human being. It's the superpower. But the reality is that the body does not power the spirit. It's the spirit that powers the body. That's why it's called a Ru'h al-Hayawani. It is the animal spirit. It animates the body. So how can it be an accident? How can it come after the fact? Because in that separation that I showed you, you had the mulk and then you had the malakut, right? But then preceding the malakut is the jabarut. It's nur, it's pure nur. So the Jabarut gives rise to the Malakut, and then the Malakut gives rise to the Mulk. So nur, and I said the spirit comes from nur. So the nur brings, the spirit into being. And then the spirit is what enlivens the body. That's why when the Ru'h is taken away, the body dies. The body is not taken away for the Ru'h to die. You see? If you look at their language, the way this is why I constantly tell everyone, don't get entrenched in that language, because you don't know the effect it's having on you subconsciously. It is instilling in you certain ideas that are far removed from reality. Completely removed from reality, and you don't realize this. It takes you further and further away from understanding the true origin of the human being, because especially for children, because then children start believing that, oh, if I do this and this, I can fly, I can do this, I can do that, I can jump. You see, the superpower comes in from there. It's as a result of my body. So if I have muscles, I can lift up the heavy object, and I can do this and I do that. It's all related to the body. The power of the human being is spiritual. This is what he's talking about. Now, where is it? Okay, he's going to explain in a bit. So, وَقَالَ قَوْمٌ إِنَّهُ عَرَضٌ فَغَلَطُوا. Those who say that the ruh is like an accident, it's a byproduct, they are wrong. لِأَنَّ الْعَرَضَ لَا يَقُومُ بِنَفْسِهِ. Because an arad, an accident, an effect cannot stand by itself. It cannot substantiate itself. It is a result of something else. وَيَكُونُ تَعْبِيًا لِغَيْرِهِ. It follows others. An accident follows the substance. فَالرُّوحُ هُوَ أَصْلُ ابْنُ آدَمَ. The ruh is the origin, the asl of the son of man, of the son of Adam. How could it be an accident? Where is your pinpoint origination? Was your body first? Were the cells created before your consciousness was developed? Then how do you rationalize the ayah from the Quran when he says he gathered all of you in a pre-worldly stage? Before you could be conceived in your mother's womb, before your body was formed for you, you existed. So how can the body come before your spirit? The spirit came before, isn't it? وَقَالِبُ ابْنُ آدَمَ تَابِعٌ لَهُ. The body, so this is where the Arabs like, this wordplay. So you have the qalb and then you have the qalib. So you have the qalb, which is the heart, and then the qalib, which is the body. So it's just another way of articulating. So وَقَالِبُ ibn Adam تَابِعٌ لَهُ. The body of the son of man follows the heart. فَكَيْفَ يَكُونُ عَرَضًا. How would it be? How can it be an accident? وَقَالَ قَوْمٌ إِنَّهُ جِسْمٌ. And then there are those who said, oh, it's a body. It's you know what they say, like a spiritual body. It's a spiritual body. Right? They said, okay, it's got form, it's got its own shape, it's got this and this. So this is where all this other nonsense comes in, like, oh, astral projection. I had an out-of-body experience. I stood there and I could see my soul. And then I could do this and I could do that. Look, somebody dies and their spirit is hovering over the whatever. They've come back to haunt everyone now. You see, this is where all this other nonsense comes in. You can see the spiritual body of the فَغَلَطُوا. They were wrong. لِأَنَّ الْجِسْمَ يَقْبَلُ الْقِسْمَ. Because the body can be divided. فَالرُّوحُ الَّذِي سَمَّيْنَاهُ قَلْبًا. We say that the heart is spiritual. وَهُوَ مَحَلُّ مَعْرِفَةُ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى. It is the place where knowledge of Allah is realized. Now, knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not material knowledge. You cannot know God Almighty by reading a book or by sitting in a class, even in this class that we're having here. That knowledge is not read through argumentation or through some discourse or through some facts or formulas or calculations. See all these calculations that they're doing mathematically to try and prove God. The God particle that they're talking about in string theory, coming to anyway, I don't know. I don't want to get into that. But knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cannot be arrived at through this theoretical discourse. This theoretical discourse, what we would call the realm of scientia, of ilm. Ilm is only meant to facilitate. It is only meant to carry you forward. That knowledge is a realization that takes place deep in the heart. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself is not a material being. You cannot observe him, you cannot experiment to prove his reality. He is a spiritual, I wouldn't even say spiritual, we don't know what being he is, but he is immaterial. And therefore, his knowledge is equally immaterial. To know him is a knowing that is immaterial. And therefore, its knowing can only take place in an immaterial place, which is the heart of the human being. وَهُوَ مَعَلُّ مَعْرِفَةُ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى لَيْسَ بِجِسْمٍ. It is not a body. وَلَا عَرَضٍ. And it is not an accident. بَلْ هُوَ مِنْ جِنْسِ الْمَلَائِكَةِ. Rather, it is from the genus of the angelic essence. Because angels are created from what? From light. And they become spiritual beings. And the heart is a spiritual entity. Therefore, it is from the same genus. It is created of light. And this is what we said before. The human being, the being, not the body or the soul or this, that and the other. The being is a point of light that has been placed inside this heart. وَمَعْرِفَةُ الرُّوحُ صَبْعَةٌ جِدًّا. And this knowledge or knowing or trying to understand the heart is a very difficult knowledge. لِأَنَّهُ لَمْ يَرِدْ فِي الدِّينِ طَرِيقٌ إِلَى مَعْرِفَتِهِ. Because there is nothing specified in the religion on how to come to know it. There is no set formula. There is nothing that, as far as revelation is concerned, that will tell you, okay, if you want to know the spirit, this is how you do it. Rather, as far as the Quran is concerned, which is prime above anything else, as far as the Quran is concerned, you have been given little knowledge about it. And there is very little inquiry you can probe into its reality. لِأَنَّهُ لَا حَاجَةٌ فِي الدِّينِ إِلَى مَعْرِفَتِهِ. Because there is no necessity to know this as far as your deen is concerned. Your deen is what we defined deen before as what? A state of indebtedness. God Almighty has given you existence and you owe it to Him. You are, from the moment you breathe life, in a state of debt. And therefore your life is to the purpose of repaying that debt. There is nothing else as far as your purpose in this world is concerned. Trying to get this and trying to understand that and trying to figure out this, that and the other has got no purpose as far as your life is concerned. There is no necessity for you to probe an inquiry into the nature of the spirit. This is what this entire chapter is for. Because you have to understand foremost that the heart is a spiritual entity. And naturally your mind is going to probe it and attempt to understand the nature of that spirit that makes up the heart. But you need to recognize here that this is a boundary you simply cannot cross. It's not because of some prohibition or whatnot. It's because of you are in a state which is limited. You are veiled. All inquiry that you can make insofar as understanding something is concerned is through your senses. Observation and experimentation to rationalize anything. And you cannot observe the heart. You cannot observe the spirit. So you cannot come to a rationality of it. So why would you even try to make that inquiry? To try and figure out what it is, when there is no necessity for you to know that as far as your deen is concerned. لِأَنَّ الدِّينَ هُوَ الْمُجَاهَدَةِ. Because the deen is a struggle. That's what it is. The deen is, you have to struggle to pay off your debt. وَالْمَعْرِفَةُ عَلَامَةُ الْهِدَايَةِ. And ma'rifah, true knowledge, is a sign of being rightly guided. True knowledge is not a sign or to know whether somebody is knowledgeable. Their indicative is not how many degrees they have, or which college and university they went to, or who was his teacher, or who was he affiliated with. That's not a sign of a knowledgeable person. The sign of a knowledgeable person is that they are rightly guided. And the sign of a rightly guided individual is that they are following or fulfilling their purpose of existence in this world. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. He did not create man and jinn except but to serve and worship Him. كما قال سبحانه وتعالى وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا. Those who strive, who struggle with us, we will show them unto our paths. We will guide them unto Siratul Mustaqim. I spoke about progression of thought and then regression of thought. And I say that, and if anybody wants to disagree and try to and disprove me, you're welcome to do it. But the only soundness that you will achieve is if your thoughts are progressive towards realizing divine unity, meaning the unity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Tawheed. And any other direction you take is actually a regress in thought. So you could know all the semantics about something, but if you do not know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all those semantics have no purpose. That's useless information. But if you strive and struggle in the ordinance that He has sent down to you, which is the deen, then He will guide you unto the path to that progression. So that at the end of that, the destination of that is when you realize true freedom, true happiness, and true contentment and soundness. That's when you become a nafs al-kamila, a complete and fortified soul. وَمَنْ لَمْ يَجْتَهِدْ حَقَّ اجْتِهَادِهِ لَمْ يَجُزْ أَنْ يَتَحَدَّثَ مَعَهُ فِي مَعْرِفَةِ حَقِيقَةِ الرُّحِ. And whoever is not struggling, a true struggle, this struggle of fulfilling your purpose as far as you're concerned in this world, if you're not struggling in the deen, if you're not struggling, leave aside the basic fundamentals of praying and fasting and that's just the first step. And then you've got multiple other steps after that. Acquiring knowledge that is praiseworthy and that is related to your purpose and fulfillment of your purpose. Doing the kind of actions that are central to your purpose. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Min husni islamil mar'i tarkuhu ma la ya'nihi." From the husn, the beauty of one's Islam, one's submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to leave that which does not concern you. If you're not struggling in what concerns you as far as your deen and your fulfillment of your dunyawi to your akhirah, anything that you do in this dunya must benefit you here as well as there. If it only benefits you here, then it is for this world only. And if you're not struggling in that, you have no business probing an inquiry into the nature of the soul and the spirit. To know, okay, what is it made of? Where is it coming from? Is it like this? Is it like that? Maybe it's this, maybe... You've got no business doing that. In fact, the term Ghazali uses is actually a Shari'i term. He's saying it from a Sharia perspective. Lam yajuz, it's prohibited. You're not allowed to do that. If you're not already doing what you're supposed to be doing. Because this is a kind of knowledge that, like I said, you won't get through ciencia, through reading some books. This is a knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will open for you. He will give you an understanding of what this is. And it's not a knowledge that you can articulate in words. This is why you find many of these books of scholars like Ghazali and others, they're very complex. They're very, very complex and sophisticated. Because these are not things that you can give in words and just give out 10 facts or top 10 facts or something like that about the heart, or top 10 facts about the, it's not something like that. This is a knowledge that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can bestow upon you. It is the kind of knowledge, Ma'rifah is a kind of knowledge that the journey has got two parts. There is the first part of the journey, which is the soul arriving to meaning, and then there's the second part of the journey, which is the meaning arriving to the soul. The first part is a struggle. You have to struggle in your Islam, in your Iman, and then in your Ihsan, so that you can then be prepared to open up for this other kind of knowledge, because this is pure knowledge. Your heart has to be in a state of purity, which means your body must be purified, and then your soul must be purified, and then your heart must be purified. It has to be in a state of purity, because that knowledge is also pure knowledge. And the two have to be intimately connected. It can't be that one is pure and the other one is impure, and then you expect to receive the truth. You'll never get it. This is why so many people, they'll read the Quran, but it doesn't get through their throat. They don't understand it. It bounces off because the heart is not ready to receive it. They'll look at an ayah, they'll look at translation and think they've understood everything there is to understand. وَأَوَّلُ أَسِّ الْمُجَاهَدَةِ أَن تَعْرِفَ عَسْكَرَ الْقَلْبِ. The first step now then in this struggle is to know the troops of the heart, because it is the heart that will receive that knowledge, and therefore the heart needs to be prepared. This is the battlefield now. You're here to struggle, you're here to strive, you're here to fight your way through. You have to fight your way through this existence, this state of existence. Alright? Now if you want to fight, you need to know your troops. لأن الإنسان إذا لم يعرف العسكر لم يصح له الجهاد. If the human being does not know his troops, his soldiers, how is he going to fight the battle? You don't know who your archers are, you don't know who your infantry, your melee is, you don't know who your cavalry is, you don't know their strengths and weaknesses, you don't know what they can do, they can't do, you don't know your administrative faculty, you don't know who your ministers are, you don't know anything. And you want to go out and conquer the world. You can't resolve your inner turmoils, and you want to go and solve the problems of the world. Now, what time is it? Are we overboard? Hmm? 5:07. Okay, I think we should okay, I can finish this one section maybe in 5 minutes, inshallah. It's a short section, then we can go into the troops of the heart. So this section, فَصْلُ لِمَاذَا خُلِقَ الْقَلْبِ. Why was the heart created? اعلم أن النفس مركب القلب. Know that the soul is a vessel of the heart. So remember when we said in the earlier section, it can't be an accident, because the soul is its vessel, which means it is its master. And the master cannot be an effect of the cause. The master doesn't come after the slave. The master comes before the slave. وَلِلْقَلْبِ عَسَاكِرْ. And then to the heart are these troops. كما قال سبحانه وتعالى, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said, وَمَا يَعْلَمُ جُنُودَ رَبِّكَ إِلَّا هُوَ. None know the soldiers of your Lord, the armies of your Lord, except Him. And there are armies in you that you have no idea about. You're completely heedless of them. Ghazali is going to talk about these later on. There are soldiers in you that are operating for the sole purpose of preserving your longevity in this world, and you are completely heedless about them. وَالْقَلْبُ مَخْلُوقٌ لِعَمَلِ الْآخِرَةِ طَلَبًا لِسَعَادَتِهِ. And the heart was created for the only purpose of doing otherworldly deeds, in order to seek out its contentment and felicity. The heart was not created for this world. The heart does not delight in the machinations and the ongoings and the fruitions of this worldly aspect. The heart does not delight in all these fancy things that you get, the cars and the things and the toys and all these things. It's got no interest in it. It's the soul that gets interested in all these. The heart was created for otherworldly deeds so that it can seek out its contentment and felicity. وَسَعَادَتُهُ مَعْرِفَةُ رَبِّهِ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ. And its contentment is in knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, mighty and wise. That's it. That's where, in a nutshell, the heart was created for otherworldly deeds. And those otherworldly deeds will grant it contentment. And its contentment will be through being in the divine presence. And we spoke about this before when we spoke about the path of salvation and the path of sanctification. Because the path of salvation, those who are on simple salvation, okay, I'm doing the basics, I'm doing my salah and everything, and that's it for me. Yeah, you will get your reward as far as the degrees of paradise are concerned. But then those who are on a path of sanctification, these people are looking for the divine presence. They want to be solely in the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because He is the one who created this world and the other world and Jannah. And if this is your love for a created thing, then what about your love for the Creator Himself? If you're going to delight in paradise, then what about your delight in the presence of the one who created paradise? وَمَعْرِفَةُ رَبِّهِ تَعَالَى تَحْصُلُ لَهُ مِنْ صَنْعِ اللَّهِ. And the process now of arriving at understanding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins by seeing and observing His creation. So you've been sent into this world and you've been given the body with all the senses. It starts from the outward. You observe the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you understand what it is. That's your ciencia. That's the first level, agent intellection. You're only observing the outward. And then you go now on the higher levels. وَهُوَ مِنْ جُمْلَةِ عَالَمِهِ. And it is, the heart is from the totality of His creation. So you observe creation and you understand creation as having come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But then again, you are also part of that creation. Your body is part of this creation, your soul is part of the creation, and your heart is part of the creation. Ergo, logically speaking, you should also strive or struggle to know your heart, isn't it? Because it is also a created thing. وَلَا تَحْصُلُ لَهُ مَعْرِفَةُ عَجَائِبَ الْعَالَمِ إِلَّا مِنْ طَرِيقِ الْحَوَاسِ. And the heart does not come to know these things, the wonders, the marvels of Allah's creation, except through the senses. Because it's the senses that see and hear and taste and feel the formal world, the created realm. وَالْحَوَاسُ مِنَ الْقَلْبِ وَالْقَالِبُ مَرْكَبَهُ. And the senses, they all permeate from the heart. This is the chain of connection. I gave a brief equation last time, if you remember. The senses, and then the brain, and then the intellect, and then the heart. So the point of origination of the senses is the heart, because that's where the directive comes from. And the body, وَالْقَالِبُ مَرْكَبَهُ, the body is just its vessel. It's only meant to facilitate, because the heart is a spiritual entity. It cannot interact with the formal world without an intermediary to facilitate it. That's what the body was created to do. To facilitate the longevity of the being in his heart in this worldly existence. ثُمَّ مَعْرِفَةُ صَيْدِهِ وَمَعْرِفَةُ شَبَكَتِهِ. And then it needs to know what it is hunting for, and it needs to know the net with which it will hunt. So you need to know what you're going to be looking for, what it is you're looking for, because you can look at all of reality and all of creation. What is it that you are actually searching for amidst all that? And then you need to know the instrument by which you're going to harness that, how you're going to capture your hunt. وَالْقَالِبُ لَا يَقُومُ. Am I on the right page? No. وَالْقَالِبُ لَا يَقُومُ إِلَّا بِالطَّعَامِ وَالشَّرَابِ وَالْحَرَارَةِ وَالرُّطُوبَةِ. And the body cannot be sustained or cannot remain or endure except by food and drink and with hydration and moisture. These are the things that are required for the body to be sustained, so that it can facilitate the heart's existence in this world. وَهُوَ ضَعِيفٌ عَلَى خَطْرٍ مِنَ الْجُوعِ وَالْعَطْشِ فِي الْبَاطِنِ. And it is always in danger inwardly from hunger and thirst. وَعَلَى خَطْرٍ مِنَ الْمَاءِ وَالنَّارِ فِي الظَّاهِرِ. And it is in danger in the outward sense from the elements like fire and water. وَهُوَ مُقَابِلٌ أَعْدَاءً كَثِيرًا. And it has got numerous other enemies. Viruses, all these illnesses, predators, animals, the elements, so many issues from the external aspect. Now what he's trying to tell you, Ghazali, here is that, actually he will continue onwards into the next section as well, to elaborate this further. But what he's trying to tell you is that in order for you to ensure that your senses are functioning to the facilitation of the heart, you have to ensure that your body is performing at its optimum, meaning its needs are taken care of, and you have protected it against all these other issues that would encounter or prevent the body from functioning the way it should function in this world, so that your heart can then find a perfect position or a state of soundness in which it can then open up to this other reality and this knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the precedence he's setting now. Because for the body to function, you're in this world, you're alive, and you cannot be alive without your body. So this is life now. How do you cultivate this life to ensure soundness? You need to ensure that your body is going to be sound. How do you do that? This is now where the central piece comes in, the main focus of it all, which is the soul. This is what he's going to elucidate now as the troops, the armies that the heart has been given to facilitate and to help moderate your life. How to evaluate your body, how to sustain it, what are the issues that you will be faced with, how to deal with all those, so that your body can function at its optimal. Your senses can then facilitate the knowing process. Because you have to start on the outward, the agent intellection, and then you go into an active state of intelligence, which is reason now, philosophical reasoning. And then you go into a state of spiritual intelligence, which is now to do with revelation, in understanding now the speech of Allah. And then there is the much higher state, which is the more difficult, which is the prophetic intelligence, which is trying to live in the way the prophets lived, which is it's a steep path. You see, so you have to learn how to do all that. And inshallah, this is now what he's going to explain further. The next section is going to be Faslu Ma'rifatu Asakir al-Qalb. What are the troops of the heart now in terms of regulating your life? Once you understand these, then you will understand how to achieve this psychological soundness. And then when you have psychological soundness, you can have intellection. Because the intellection as I said, begins with the outward, with the agent intellection, with the senses, right? If you look at Surah Al-Fatiha, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. So, all praise due to Allah, the Lord of the worlds. And that's Alameen. Now, the Alam is an Ismu Ala, it's a noun of instrumentation. It facilitates the knowing, which is the ilm. Like miftah, like a key, right? The key is an instrument. The key is not the opening itself. In the same way, the alam is not the knowledge itself. It only facilitates the knowing. And through your senses now, your observation and your examining and all that, you acquire ilm. You learn, you look at the books and you read and you study and you acquire ilm. And then the ilm is also a facilitator. It facilitates the ma'rifah. So you need the ilm to reach at a level of ma'rifah. And then you need your senses in order to acquire the ilm. See? So anyway, we'll get more to all that in detail, inshallah. We're running out of time now. Going a bit over time. So let's end here, inshallah. And then we'll continue next week with the next section. Let's take a break and then resume in 5 minutes. Jazakumullah khairan. We'll see everyone in 5 minutes. Bismillah, alhamdulillah. Now, yes, go ahead, Roshan. Go ahead, Roshan. You have your hand up. Am I muted?
Assalamu
Okay.
alaikum, Ustaz.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Go ahead.
Thank you very much for this lesson. I learned even more today. I have like a comment and a dilemma myself.
Mm-hmm.
And you state that if the heart, you said the heart is made of light. So if the heart is made of light, that is from the angelic genus. And Allah says, Allahu nuru samawati wal ard. And yahdillahu linurihi man yasha. So Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth, and He is the one that guides to His light whom He wills. Mm-hmm. Then we do not have any choice other than to follow those whom Allah has guided to His light.
Yes.
Like the prophets, for example. Not that we will get light from His prophets, but rather His prophets will direct us in order for Allah to guide us to His light. Now, I've been traveling to Morocco mainly to look for that, to find somebody or someone who follow Rasulullah sallallahu truly follow him. And I booked even a ticket in May this year to go back there. To spend another 2 weeks to look for that person. And I think it's a struggle. And I think that's what Imam Razali is saying, that we have to struggle to find that, right? And now, am I correct in pursuing this path?
He actually says it much later on as well, that you should, such a path cannot be accomplished without a guide. So he does say later on as well that you should find somebody who is mature, who is knowledgeable. He uses the word sheikh, which is, some would interpret that as, okay, it's a sheikh, like someone like an imam or something. But it could be anyone who is mature, who has knowledge, and who has gone through this path themselves. So they know, okay, where are the pitfalls and where are the obstacles and what to avoid and so on, so that they become a guide for you. And he himself is attempting to be a guide in that sense by writing this book and by writing his other books as well. This is, like we said, is not a theoretical knowledge. It can't be acquired through any sort of theorem. Like, you can't just read a book and then know exactly what to do. The book is only going to give you a few pointers here and there. You need somebody who is going to show you, okay, you did A, B, C, and this person observes from an external perspective and tells you, okay, you shouldn't have done that, you should do this instead, right? In the mundane sense, if you look, many of these successful people, they actually have coaches. They have coaches who tell them through an external observation that you should do this and you should do that. Kings in the past, they always had advisors, because the king himself might see something from his perspective but doesn't see it from another's perspective, and then the advisor tells him, no, take this into consideration. So that's like a guide in this case. And in the past, some prophets were also sent to kings. Like the prophet Isaiah was sent to King Hezekiel before the Babylonian invasion. And he advised the king, do this and don't do that, prepare your defenses like this and like that. So it's important to have somebody who, will be a guide for you. And that doesn't necessarily have to be, mufti of the highest order or sheikh so-and-so, whatever. The thing is with the awliya, there are two kinds of awliya. There are those who are on a scholarly path, and then they keep going through that path with righteousness, and then they become awliya. And awliya never know that they are awliya, by the way. If somebody claims that that I'm a wali of Allah, that person is deluded. The awliya do not know that they are awliya, really. And it could be, on the other side, could be somebody who is not really an alim per se, but is just righteous, and you see in that person a guide. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can put either or in your pathway. He can put an alim in your pathway from whom you can acquire knowledge, and he can teach you how to move ahead in life. Or it could be somebody even within your family, for that matter. Even for most people, it's their spouses. Really, it's your spouse could be your guide, because your spouse can tell you about yourself that you have been oblivious to, right? So it's important, if you're going to take this path, you find a guide. Now, the guide, it doesn't mean you go out and look for a Sufi to help you. This guide, there are certain criteria, and this criteria you'll find in Ghazali's book, the Kitabul Ilm, the first book of the Ihya. He puts up these criteria. This person has to have the religious knowledge, like the fiqh, has to have a fiqh, has to have an aqidah, has to have a creedal conviction, and then has to be somebody who is on a path of self-purification himself. Not that he's giving you theoreticals about, you should do this and you should do this righteous act and this, that, and you should do tasbih 20 times a day and all that, but then he himself is not doing that. that person cannot be a guide in that sense. Now, we'll come to, we'll talk about Ayatul Nur in another session, inshallah. I want to dedicate a special session just for Ayatul Nur. We'll talk about more, because you'll understand what the Nur is from that, inshallah. Now, now go ahead, just read it. Yeah. Go ahead, we'll do one in one. Loudly, I can't hear.
Can I go ahead?
No, there's a question here. Give me one, and then we'll come to you, inshallah. Now, go ahead. Is that like a question, or is it just a statement?
How can soul be master?
Yeah, the soul cannot be the master. That's the whole point of this alchemy, is to show you that the soul is not the master. The heart is the master. If you allow the soul to be the master, then you are running on the volitions of the soul, right? And the soul has got weaknesses, but the heart is created fitrah. So the soul has got its own fitrah, but it's not the fitrah of the human being. The fitrah of the human being is the heart. So only the heart can be the master in this case. Was that from the chat? Okay. Now, okay, go ahead, Zaytun, your hand was up.
Yes.
No.
Assalamu alaikum, Ustaz.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Yes. I have one question and one little bit of advice for Brother Roshan, who mentioned something earlier. I think I'll go with his first before I ask my question. I think it's a very noble thing that he's trying to look for a guide, but I'd just like for him to pay attention to, and this is me saying this based on so many people around that I know personally that have been on this path and who are still on this path of looking for a guide. One thing they all say is it's so fraught with untold dangers, in the sense that, especially in this day and age, where you don't know who is who, everybody, you see someone and you're not really sure who they are. You think they are who they appear to be, but they are not. Basically, appearance and reality, do not match in situations like that. And I've also heard of, personally also heard of, a lot of spiritual abuse, with people who put themselves in the hands of these guides. Let me put it that way. So all I just want to say is just a piece of advice, for him to just be careful, because there are a lot of people who have complained about, being abused spiritually, especially when you put yourself in the hands of someone else. It's very easy to be manipulated.
Yeah.
when you put yourself in such a very dicey position.
Yeah.
So it takes someone with the true heart of Allah to be able to guide another person to Allah.
Yeah.
Because usually what you have are people who see you in a state of weakness and they want to take advantage of that.
Yes.
So I just need for that brother to understand,
Yes.
Brother Roshan to understand that there are a lot of things like this out there.
Yeah.
So I may Allah guide him on his path.
I mean, inshallah.
Yeah. And then my question, please, is you mentioned something. I'm not sure if I paid attention, if I understood it correctly, or maybe I just didn't pay attention. Well, you said freedom is to do good and not necessarily a choice. Was that what you said?
No, the choice is to do good. And doing good is what gains you that freedom. So if free will is executed in the choice of good.
Got it. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, and also to add on what you said about the guides, it is very true, because, and I'm not going to speak out of ignorance. I've had that experience myself in my youth. I encountered one such individual. I'm not going to mention his name, and it seemed on the outward that this person was, because they demonstrated an acumen in knowledge. Like, he could answer questions and he could, quote from here and there, and it felt like this was the right person only to, and the true nature of this individual came in a remarkable way. It came when I was in i'tiqaf with him at the masjid during Ramadan. That's when you actually, if you remember, I said about safar, the journey, right? The journey, I forgot, I should have remembered to find that poem for you. But now I'll look for that poem for you. The journey unveils your true self to you, as well as to others who are with you or journeying with you, right? And then you get to see their true selves as well. And i'tiqaf is essentially like that. It's like a journey in that sense. You've left your home and now you're living with such an individual for those 10 nights. That's when I realized that this person was far more dangerous than I could imagine. And the fact that his manipulation was such that he had actually, everyone else was deluded by that. They actually followed what he was doing in the masjid. And I don't want to get into the discussion of that, but yeah, you will encounter such individuals. And that's not to say that you should, it's not to discourage you from seeking it out, because part of the process of looking, of searching, is that you will find these kinds of situations. You will find the bad, and you will learn from that as well, to then look out for the real good. And I have had teachers in my past who are excellent. I mean, I will remember them to the day I die, as far as I'm concerned. And then there are other teachers whom I'll just do dua for them. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide them. Because there's some who actually misguided me, and I went down the wrong path at one point as well. So you will encounter that as well, inshallah. So, you should be careful, undoubtedly. Take a look at Ghazali's text. I wish we could sit and go through the book of knowledge, because in that book is where he gives you all the fundamentals of, as far as seeking knowledge is concerned. Who to look out for, what qualities you should pick, how to filter them out. The entire criteria is there. If you can find a good English translation, give that a good read. At least it'll give you an understanding before you set out who or what sort of archetype you should be looking for. Yes, go ahead. Who's next? Alaikum salam. Alaikum salam, Mujahid. Yes.
How are you?
Alhamdulillah.
We asked to put our videos on so you can see my.
It's actually good because I can see everyone's faces.
Yeah, I'm going to have to blur the back, but inshallah I can ask the question. It's regarding in the text we covered in line. Let me just bring it up 1 second. It says "I'lamu anna an-nafs markabul qalb." So the nafs is the ship of the heart, or the ethereal heart.
The
So based
vessel.
on that, I was just thinking, Is that correct? What I translated is the vessel of the heart. Sorry.
The vessel of the heart, yes.
Yeah. Or vessel for the heart. Yeah. So is the ethereal heart contained within the body, whilst the nafs is not contained? As when sleeping, the nafs is taken by Allah. So if the nafs is not contained, can it occupy and travel the heart? Is my question.
No, it's all contained. So the way you would look at it is that the heart has been placed in the soul, and then the soul has been placed in the heart. The soul has been placed in the body. Yeah. So the heart is in the soul, and then the soul has been placed in the body. So that the soul vessels the. So this is what also in the earlier section, when he began by saying that there are two aspects. Where is it? إذا شئت أن تعرف نفسك فاعلم أنك من شيئين أول هذا القلب والثاني يسمى النفس والروح, and then he says والنفس هو القلب الذي تعرف بعين الباطن. So that the heart becomes embodied into the soul essentially. So when you're using the heart, you're referring to the soul as a collective housing for the heart. Because it all works in tandem. The heart doesn't work in isolation, and the faculties of the soul also don't work in isolation. They work in tandem. They work simultaneously. So while you're doing this intellection, your shahwa is doing its own thing and contributing to that moment, and your ghadab is doing. So let's say, for example, you're sitting in this session here and we're having a discussion, and you're learning, right? But then I say something that is ridiculous, and you feel a bit of irritation by that, right? Or let's say you're sitting there and then you get a smell of food, for example, and suddenly the appetite comes on. So while you're doing your intellection, your shahwa is also doing its something else, and then your ghadab is also interacting. That's the collective soul now, you see, and it is in real time while the senses are picking up. The brain's processing, the mind's intellection, the heart is understanding simultaneously. And this is why it is like a collective thing now. That's why you would call it, that's why the scholars would sometimes refer to the soul as the heart, or the heart as the soul, when it's doing that, when it's working in harmony, and when it's doing something praiseworthy. But in terms of now breaking down, let's say you want to just sort of visualize, okay, where is each component? The way you would visualize it is that the being has been placed inside the heart, then the heart has been placed inside the soul, and then the soul has been placed inside the body. But you are a single being when you're operating. Your body is working in singular. Sorry, what was that? It was a bit blurred.
I was trying to show you my diagram, but it's blurred. 1 second. Let me see if I can unblur it. So I was trying to explain to myself this what you just mentioned.
Can you make that a bit bigger? I can't see. It's very small. Actually, Saif will have to. Saif, can you make that bigger? Can you? Is it there?
I don't know. Oh, let me check. Does that work?
Okay. Yes.
It's the wrong way around, but that's basically the concept mentioned in the book, and this is what I was thinking. So.
The second one is what I would. The second iteration.
This is from the book. So you've got the body. It's just a diagram. See.
Yeah.
The body's out here. Then you've got the soul. Then you've got the heart.
Yeah, that's what I would look at most. Yeah, that would be a better representation than the first one.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is incorrect.
I still cannot see.
The soul doesn't sit inside of the heart.
No, that's incorrect. Yeah, the soul is not inside the heart. See, here's the other thing. When you're trying to understand these things, you have to break linearity of thought. See, linearity of thought works in the mannerism of, there are certain axioms as far as the physical world is concerned. Like, two things cannot occupy the same space at the same time. Linearity of thought also entails that each object has got a location. Like you can give it geometrical coordinates in space. This is this space, like space here. Like my hand is here, my other hand is here. So this has its own location, this has its own location. But when it comes to now, like the heart and the soul, the consciousness, you can't give these entities specific locations. That's just a diagrammatic representation. But in terms of understanding them, you have to break linearity of thought. You have to break away from the way the causal world would function and sort of just understand it in another sense. I can't explain that. There's no word to explain that. This is why if you look at the Quran, you can't read it as a normal book, like line by line, section by section, and then go to the next chapter like that. You see, it's all, there's an ayah here, there's an ayah there. It's meant to break linearity of thought, because for you to understand that essential knowledge, you cannot come to it in terms of your worldly rationale. You have to leave that at the door and approach it and just understand it as it is. Mm-hmm. Now, what's that? There's a question in the chat.
Many of the vitalist psychologists
Oh, I can't.
in 20th centuries, like James Hillman, in his book Revisioning Psychology, used the words psyche and soul interchangeably without mention of the mind or intellect, as we are currently studying with you. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so many of the Orientalists in their study of psychology, like psyche, the word psyche actually comes from Greek. It's what the Greeks use. That's where psychology comes from. Psyche means soul. That's why in English, like, they are equatable or they're synonymic. The word soul is English. The word psyche is of Greek origin, and that's what it means. So psyche and nafs are equatable, and that's why soul and nafs are also like translatable, not equatable. That's so they'll use psyche or they'll use soul. But without the mention of the mind or the intellect, they don't actually go into that, because the thing about the secular sciences, they don't acknowledge the mind to be a separate entity. They regard the mind as the brain, as the physical component, the organ with gray matter. They regard that as the mind. So in the English language, and you can do your study or your quick research if you want, you can Google it. The brain and mind are synonymic in the English language, but not in the Arabic language. These were known even before the arrival of the Quran. These were separate entities. And they are separate entities, because the intellect, al-aql, is part of the soul. It is immaterial, and the brain is part of the body. It's material. No.
Can we say that
Mm-hmm.
because they have a flawed, essentially godless epistemology, godless, the resultant therapies they surmise in behavioral or cognitive or archetypal programs always remain incomplete?
Yeah, because here's the thing about a complete soundness. Let me repeat the question for those if you can't hear. Actually, is this from the chat? Yeah, okay, so it's in the chat box. Because see, the human being, as Ghazali says, that the heart was created to know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's where it finds its tranquility. So if it does not know God, meaning that the being is not aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let's say if the being is not aware of God, then the being will be in a state of turbulence, because the most agitated state is in a state of not knowing, and the most absolute knowing is the knowing of God, because God alone is the absolute. Everything else is relative. Everything else is relative to Him. He is the most absolute, which means His truth is the most absolute truth. And for the heart, it must believe, because we say the heart has got two functions: to believe and to know. And for it to believe, it must cling to something that will hold it. And any other truth, a factual truth or so, can always change its form. So clinging to something that is only of a factual nature will betray the heart. That means that the heart, for it to find complete felicity and soundness, it must cling to a truth that is absolute. And that truth is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is God, right? Now, any other theory, especially from the godless world, will eliminate the actual remedy for the issue the human being is facing. So how you can't expect the procedure to yield any results. Because the very medicine is being removed from the procedure. That's the cure for the heart. So this is, you see, all the therapies that result from that are cyclical and paradoxical. They cannot resolve many of the issues that people actually face. Many people who actually find psychological soundness later on in life, they will tell you, if they are truthful and honest, that the therapy did not assist them in finding that. It may have assisted them in maybe the temporal trauma that they may have faced. Maybe there was an issue, something, and then the therapy helped them just sort of overcome that momentarily to put them in a bit of ease, but they themselves came to resolve that much later on. Because remember, every human being receives inspiration from Allah. If they are sincere in finding it, if they are sincere in their search for it, He will inspire them. Allahu yahdi Allahu li nurihi man yasha. Allah will guide His nur to whomsoever He wills, and it is nur that gives one that inspiration, that true knowledge. Because nur, by its nature, is something that reveals. So you're in a state of darkness, a state of internal turmoil. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you nur in your heart, and that unveils soundness for you. It puts you in a state of soundness because you can now see. Anyway, yeah, you're absolutely true, right, because this is the issue that you have with these, and the problem is that, see, you've got what you would call, and this is what we talked about, Abu Zayd al-Balkhi put down 4 types of depression, right? You've got your normal depression, endogenous, exogenous, and then you've got your reactive. So the reactive depression is something you can go, let's say, for 2-3 sessions, therapy, resolve it. The normal depression is something you can resolve by yourself. It's a day-to-day thing. And then the exogenous, the endogenous, those are things that it's either self-inflicted, endogenous, or exogenous, somebody inflicted it on you, and you go for all these therapy sessions. You could be sitting there for 2-3 years not finding a resolution, and they'll just keep giving you pills and such to try and get you out of it. But many of the other cases that now, when the soul crosses over the threshold of normalcy and the damage becomes permanent now you've got other problems, whether they are psychotic problems or physiological, like epilepsy or some sort of neurotic imbalance. How do you resolve that? They can't come to those conclusions because they don't understand how the internal mechanism of the human being actually works. Like, they eliminate the concept of the mind from the get-go. And we say that psychology is to do with an epistemological crisis. If you don't know how the mind works, how do you resolve the epistemological crisis? Because that's what epistemology is about. How do you know what you know? Because you could be believing in something of which you do not know the process of how you came to know it, which means that you cannot verify its authenticity or its truth, which means the heart is clinging to something that's betraying it, and that's causing a turmoil internally. Because you don't know how to rationalize it. You don't know how you came to know what you came to know, because you don't know how the mind works. Right? This is a bit more complex, but... Yeah, that's the nature of the soul, yeah. Sometimes you just need somebody to confide in, because we remember yes, somebody who will guide you, somebody who will advise you, it could be your father or your mother or your sibling, somebody, a close friend, somebody, because that's again when we talked about the different words, right, pertaining the soul. One of the meanings was to vent out. Another meaning was to draw in, to absorb. So the other person can absorb some of your anguish, and you get a chance to bring it out, and maybe this, and even in that mode of discussing it or bringing it out, you might be able to find a resolution in that. But yeah, go ahead. Next, who is it? Hina. Sister Hina's hand is up, I think.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Sir, it's not really a question, but a kind of a comment. Like you explained, you used the word immaterial, and it's very interesting because what is immaterial is something that is not of the material world, so something that is essence. But generally, the way the language has been degraded and manipulated, in English language, we say something is immaterial when it doesn't have any value.
Yeah.
So it's an immaterial thing.
Yeah.
But in this case, what is immaterial is something that has actual essence.
Yes. Yes. Well, in the English language, the word, like it's same in Arabic, some words can have different meanings. Like accident, for example, I mentioned accident, right? Could mean something happened, it's a mistake. But it could mean this as a technical term as well. And it could mean something else. So immaterial is one of those words as well. It depends on the context in which it is applied as well. If any of you has watched the film The Pirates of the Caribbean, right? There's when you mentioned that, I just remembered there's a dialogue he says to he says the immaterial has become immaterial, and he was referring to the supernatural, right? What he was trying to say is that in this world now, that which is immaterial, the ethereal now, the supernatural, is now got no value or purpose now. Now we are moving towards a purely materialistic world. But that was an interesting piece of dialogue. But you're right, in the language it can be manipulated. But it doesn't necessarily just mean the one thing. It depends on the context. So with language you have to always remember logical semantics and then contextual semantics. What does the word mean as far as dictionary is concerned? And you'll find many definitions of the same word. Some will be completely different, some will be related to each other. And then what's the context of its application? Yeah.
It's my second question. It's a little bit off, I mean not really in psychology, but if you have time, can you explain that please? It is from Surah Sajda, ayah number 5. When we studying about the amr, the command, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, Yudabbirul amra minas samai ilal ardi, thumma ya'ruju ilayhi fi yawmin kana miqdaruhu alfa sanatin mimma ta'uddun. So he arranges the matter from the heaven to the earth. But when he has decreed something, the amr, how does it ascend back to him? Is it through the actions or through the actual flow of the creation? What happens? I mean, I really confused in this.
So I just opened up the ayat. So yudabbirul amra minas samai ilal ard. You have to actually look at this in the ayah preceding that. Allahu alladhi khalaqa as-samawati wal ard wa ma baynahuma fi sittati ayyamin thumma istawa 'ala al-'arsh ma lakum min dunihi min waliyyin wala shafi'in afala tadhakkarun. Will you not be thankful, or will you not be mindful? Yudabbiru, and dabbara here is in the reflective sense. So dabbara means it's a sort of a motion that is progressive but in the reflective sense. So you've got fikr, which is a forward sort of thinking, and then you've got tafakkur, which is sort of like a backward thinking, but it's progressively backward. Means you're reflecting now. You know, like how you say you're looking at something in hindsight. That's what afala yatadabbarun al-Quran. Will they not reflect? Will they not ponder? So you look at the outward and then you go back to it, and then you now start thinking more deeply about it. So the amr is what it sort of rearranges itself in the return flow. So the amr comes from istawa al arsh, means he has ascended above the arsh. So he's not affected by time, space, matter, and all the laws of gravity and motion and all these things. All these laws that we know as far as the observable universe is concerned, and then the other realms as well, the samawat, he is not affected by those. He's above the throne because the throne is what governs all those. See, the amr is issued from the throne. You know how you would say like the throne of governance, right? So he's above that. Means he's not affected by all that. So the amr descends from that highest maqam, goes through the 7 heavens and then into the material world of khalq, where the amr now is manifested. But then there is a report back, is essentially what you would say, that there's a sort of it's a two-way communication, right? There's a report back to him. يدبر الأمر من السماء إلى الأرض ثم يعرج إليه في يوم كان مقداره ألف سنة مما يعدون. That report goes also back to him in terms of what has transpired now. So the Amr, for example, has been sent down to you as the human being to pray your salah. It's time for Maghrib. The Amr has been sent down to you. Now, it is on you to fulfill the Amr. So you hear the adhan, but then you're busy playing cards or you're doing something else, and then 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour pass away, and then, I have to pray Maghrib, and then you jump up and down. You see? So that's now the report going back. Okay, I gave you the Amr, this is how you did it. The rest is to give you an understanding of, how vast also the realm is. Kana miqdaruhu, its measure is like 1,000 years of what you would count. He's beyond time and space. ثم استوى على العرش. He's risen above the arsh. He's not affected by time and space. So it could take 1,000 years as far as you are concerned, but to him, he's eternal. He's not affected by those 1,000 years. ذلك عالم الغيب وشهادة العزيز الرحيم. He is the knower of the unseen and وشهادة and the seen. So we have alam al-shahada, alam al-ghaib, the realm that is observable and the realm that is unobservable. So he is the one, he knows everything that is occurring in both of these dimensions. Now, I hope that clarified the ayah for you.
Right, Jazakallah.
No.
Thank you.
Yes, is that from, there's another in the chat?
Somebody's asking
Uh-huh.
which book.
Which book? In reference to?
Not sure. Either it's the first question, revision in psychology.
Okay.
Okay, and it is another
Maybe.
one. It is important to find a guide to reach at an-nafs al-kamila.
Mm-hmm.
What if one can follow the path of Ashan according to the hadith of our Prophet the way Dr. Iqbal and Maulana Rumi did?
I don't know what Ashan is. I can see an Arabic word there. What is that?
Al-Hassan.
Al-Ihsan. Is that what it is? Al-Ihsan? Yeah, that's essentially the path. That's the path. That's the directive of that. The path of Ihsan. And it's been given as a descriptive. So yes, you don't need per se a guide on that, as long as you adhere to this principle. أن تعبد الله كأنك تراه فإن لم تكن تراه فإنه يراك. You serve your Lord as though you can see Him. If you cannot see Him, know that He's seeing you. Which means what? Which means in every action that you perform, you be mindful that you are under observation. You are under observation. So the first question you need to ask yourself in any action that you perform, is my Lord pleased with what I am about to do? Or will He be pleased with what I do? That's essentially the path of ihsan. You can still follow it yourself, but you need to recognize your boundaries. You need to recognize where your limitations lie as far as your knowledge of them is concerned. Means that you can be a righteous person without having to study the science of tasawwuf. There is a science that will facilitate it for you and make it easier, but you can still be on a path of purity without having to study that. Or ilm al-suluk. In the past it was called ilm al-suluk. Ilm al-suluk is like a salik. This was a behavioral science. Today it's not really given much consideration, and the West have turned it into their own thing as far as psychology is concerned. But ilm al-suluk was really to do with the behavior of the human being, as far as the behavior of the soul is concerned and the behavior of the heart is concerned. This is where now you would understand what is the prophetic character. So Ghazali's Ihya would be the perfect guide for anyone in this case, because you go through the first 10 books, he talks about the outward practice mostly. You've got the book of Salat, the Zakat, of Saum, and then Hajj. He gives you all the essentials in there. And then you look at the second 10 books, which is the second volume, and he talks mostly about the Iman aspect, the belief. And then at the mark of the 21st book, right in the heart of the Ihya, is the Prophet's character. Then the entire book in there is about the Prophet's character. So as long as you understand the prophetic character and you mimic that, it should suffice for you as a guide. This is what I'm going to talk about this later on, prophetic intelligence. But the idea is that you can mimic the prophetic character. You can't get prophetic intelligence. It's not for the normal human being. You can't achieve that. You cannot be a prophet. That intelligence is reserved only for the prophet. But you can mimic their path, the things that they do. And this is, if you look in many of the Sahaba, this is what they did. Ibn Abbas, for example, used to dress exactly the Prophet used to dress. He used to wear his hair the way the Prophet would wear his hair. He used to even walk the way the Prophet would walk. Some of the Sahaba, they mimicked the Prophet to the letter, exactly in the mannerism of how he did each and everything. You see, so you can mimic the prophetic path, because the prophetic path is observant that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always observing His creation, is observing you. That's the path of ihsan. The path of muraqaba, and then the path of mushahada. The path of mushahada is much higher, meaning you can see the divine presence. That's much more, you don't jump right into that. You start with muraqaba. You start in a state of being observed, meaning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is watching your every move, your every action. If I do this, is it pleasing to Allah? If I take this glass and I fill it with water and I want to drink this, then how do I drink this water so that it is pleasing to my Lord Almighty? This is where I look at the prophetic character. And the prophetic character was to say Bismillah and to take 3 steps while sitting down. And that's it. That's all you have to do. Right? It's not easy. I mean, that's a simple thing, but there are more difficult things that, the more you progress towards that. Because there are things that the Prophet ﷺ did that were wajib for him, but are not wajib for everyone else. And you have to be careful, because it's a very difficult path to take if you do that. If you mimic him to the letter, it's very difficult. It can become overburdening for you. Religion can become a burden for you. And he warned many of the Sahaba in the early periods not to do that. Because if they take on the religion wholesomely, the way he was supposed to do it, you could end up leaving the religion. It can become a burden for you. So, you take it step by step. And that's the path of ihsan. That's the path of ihsan. There's no other thing or this, that, and Sufi this and there and whatever. The path of ihsan is to, in whatever action you do, to ensure that it is a righteous action. In other words, my Lord is watching me, and therefore I need to be cautious. Is this action pleasing to Him? And once you ratify that it is pleasing to Him, then you go ahead and perform it. And the only way you ratify it is to observe and see, did the Prophet do it? Or did the Prophet sanction it? Meaning, did he allow it? Because there are certain things that he allowed. You see, in the hadith, there are certain things that he said you should do, and certain things he said that it's okay to do. But then there were other things that he didn't say you should or okay to do. He did them himself. So you need to know, this is where your knowledge comes in. This is where your study comes in, to try and study that. And you study that in its correct methodology. You don't just dive into the hadith and take out a fiqh for yourself. You'll be on a different religion every day. You need to follow the methodology as it has been set down. You see, so study the fiqh of the madhab that you follow. If you're Hanafi, study Hanafi fiqh, because you need to follow the succession of knowledge. The scholars are the successors of the prophets. So that chain of transmission, part of our tradition is, you see, so Imam Abu Hanifa, for example, is part of the third generation. The Salaf al-Salihin, the third generation, Imam Abu Hanifa is part of that generation. Imam Malik is part of that generation. Imam Shafi was Imam Malik's student. Imam Ahmad is renowned in his scholarship and his understanding. These individuals, they weren't just blind, guesswork or speculators, and they had complete schools of thought with hundreds of thousands of scholars over the generations to ratify it. So we have a fiqh, start studying the fiqh, because you cannot take a path of tasawwuf if you do not have a fiqh. Sidi Ahmad Zarruq says the faqih must have tasawwuf, he must have a purification, but the Sufi must have a fiqh. And neither of these is possible without Iman. Iman, to rationalize Iman, is you have the science of Aqidah. So these are the three important things that you need. You need your fiqh, your Aqidah, and then you need a sort of a methodology, a tariqah. In today's time, there's this sickness that comes out and says it's all haram. Prior to the rise of the Saudi family, everyone in the Muslim world had a fiqh, had an aqidah, and had a tariqah. You can do your own research. Don't take my word for it. Do your own research. You'll see. If you are in the India-Pakistan region, your fiqh was Hanafi, your aqidah was Maturidi. And if you are like from Morocco or some of the North African regions, your fiqh was Maliki, your aqidah was at-Tahawi or Ashari, and your tariqah was the tariqah of Imam Junaid. These have already been verified, and they've been authenticated in our tradition by hundreds of scholars. So, all the material is there, and it's easy for you to study them. And you can take this path yourself without having to say, okay, I need a specific teacher or a specific guide to really take this path. Otherwise, I'm not taking the path. I don't want to make any mistakes. No, don't take that approach at all. Don't take that approach. You need to get started at some point. And what really underlies the path of ihsan is ikhlas. Sidi Ahmad Zarruq, in his definition of tasawwuf, he says that first and foremost there are over 2,000 definitions of tasawwuf. But what ties them all together is ikhlas. And this is where ihsan begins. It begins with sincerity. Right? Well, I'm going to go off on a long discussion on that now. I'm being told the time is running out. Yes. Quickly, last 3 questions from everyone. Quick. Yes, go ahead, Roshan.
Yeah, I don't have a question, but I want to thank everyone, and especially Sister Zaytoun, for the advice that I've been given. Just to make sure that you guys are comfortable, I'm studying how the Sufis practice, Islam. And then I came across a lesson online, the live lesson from the Lord Tree Foundation in UK, explaining the lives of one of the great Sheikh, Sheikh Muhammad ibn Habib from Meknes in Morocco. And we're dealing with his life, with his poems, and try to understand his life. And the first thing I noticed in the lesson is he is a great sheikh that unite the Sharia and the Haqiqah.
Yes.
And that's the reason I took that course, and it's still ongoing. It's my third lesson. It's a 15-lesson course. So I guess after I finish with that course, I'll have a better idea where to go in Morocco to find the true follower of Rasulullah Sallallahu. Now, one question I have, if I do find that person, the sheikh, whoever he is, whether he's Sufi or non-Sufi, whatever, And I know for sure because I'm going to apply in my life what he's teaching me. And then based on that application, I will know if it is what the knowledge is giving me is true or not. Right? So if I do find that person, is it necessary for me to give bay'ah to that person in
No.
order to be connected to Rasulullah?
No. That's now going into Sufism. That's how the Sufiya do. Or you have to pledge your loyalty and you only serve that one sheikh and he becomes your qutub and blah blah blah. Everyone thinks my sheikh is the qutub then, and there's there's so many qutubs everywhere and so many peers everywhere. No, it doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. This guide, what you would call a spiritual guide, is a teacher. Is teaching you or coaching you in the practice of the religion. And there you have to identify three things. And this is what it's a poem from one of the Mauritanian scholars. أهمها عقائد ثم الفروع تصوف وآلة بها شروع. The most important of all is aqidah, and then the branches of practice, and then tasawwuf, and then whichever instrument you will pick to learn the sciences and the knowledges. You have to look out for these three things. How convicted is he in aqidah? Is he somebody who is speculating on, let's say, like the nature of God? Or is he somebody who is saying things like, okay, I had a conversation with an angel? Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But if he's somebody who is talking on those phantasmal levels, then there's a red flag there. How practicing is he insofar as the rites and rituals of the religion are concerned? Insofar as his salah is concerned, or his fasting is concerned, and all those things. How ascetic is he? Because one of the primary steps of zuhud, of ihsan or tasawwuf, is zuhud. Zuhud is an asceticism that is detached from materiality, meaning there's no material inclinations of that person. I've seen a lot of these Sufi sheikhs, they'll wear gold rings and they've got gold whatever and big turbans, and they've got a nice throne that they've made for themselves, and they've got people who come and do this pledging of loyalty or give bay'ah. That's Sufism. That's not the teacher you're looking for. Really. I've had people who've come to me and asked me to give me bay'ah. and that's not the path that you want to do. That's not how it works. I'll be a teacher, but I'm not a Sufi sheikh or whatever. That's the bay'ah thing and all that this is something that has been corrupted, because in the traditional sense, it was that you joined like a zawiya or something, and you spent time there, because learning required a spending of time in the presence of the teachers when they would speak or when they would have their gatherings or their majlis and such, and you learn from that. But the ihsan is not about sitting and doing dhikr or doing whatever recitation of the Quran at 3 a.m. and all. Those are all ritualistic. The true path of ihsan is embodiment of righteousness. And this is why the Quran says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَلَقْتَهَمَ الْأَقَبَ وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الْأَقَبَ فَقُّ رَقَبَ أَوْ إِطْعَامٌ فِي يَوْمٍ ذِي مَسْقَبَ. He also says in Surah Al-Duha, أَلَمْ يَجِدْكَ يَتِيمًا فَآوَى وَوَجَدَكَ ضَالًا فَهَدَى وَوَجَدَكَ عَائِلًا فَأَغْنَى فَأَمَّا الْيَتِيمَ فَلَا تَقْهَرْ وَأَمَّا السَّائِلَ فَلَا تَنْهَرْ وَأَمَّا بِنِعْمَةِ رَبِّكَ فَحَدِّثْ. You see, you have to be righteous in your conduct. Look after the orphan, look after the needy, be among those who are themselves doing such kind of works. That's the path of ihsan. That is the real struggle. That is the steep path. It's not about sitting and doing 1,000 times subhanallah and then turning off the lights and doing Allah, Allah, Allah. That's not ihsan. That is now bid'ah. And it can be arguable or debatable, but that is bid'ah. That's not what you want to look out for. If you're really looking for somebody to guide you in ihsan, these are the practices. If you go to Mauritania and you see some of these scholars, the way they live, those are the guides you really want. Sheikh Hamza's teacher, Murabitul Hajj, It was in his practice. You could just know that this is the guide I want. You know, he would wake up for tahajjud. He would after tahajjud he would teach, and then after fajr he would teach, and then he would take a nap, and then he would teach, and this is what he used to do right outside his tent. That was his practice, and this was a pious man. That's the kind of guidance you want to look out for. Avoid all these other setups. This is my advice to you. I mean, I'm not there on the ground, so you. Sheikh Muhammad ibn al-Habib was a renowned scholar. He was well known. So if you really understand his practices and sort of implement those the way they are, not the way they've been interpreted and then manipulated, but the way that he himself practiced it, then that's something that can become beneficial to you. You know. Anyway, we are running out of time. Yes, go ahead, Mujahid.
I'm going to try and be very quick. I've got another diagram that I've made. Wanted to share. Wanted your advice.
Can you expand that?
This you've got the. Yeah.
Oh, hold on.
Can you see it?
No, one second. Let Saif just expand that.
Okay.
It's on the small screen. I can't.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So here you've got your. Sorry. Gosh, sorry. I'm trying to show you one. So you've got a wakeful state.
Yeah.
It's a wakeful state, and you've got the body, which is the outer ring, and the inner one you've got the ruh, nafs, and qalb. Together they make like this is like jism, and this is ghayr jism. So I don't know if is that terminology correct? First question. But other than the body, so you have the body, and then what is other than the body?
It could be, but it's not the term that the scholars would use. It would be more specific. It would just be either ruh, or it would be nafs, or it would be qalb, depending on the context that they're speaking.
But they haven't. Okay, so they've never been like compiled, put into a separate kind of category.
It's not, because again they are essentially the same essential entity. Well, I mean, we're just separating them to try and understand each one in its quality, but they are the same essential quality. Yeah.
Okay. So I've got another two. Where is it now? Yeah. Okay. Okay. So the sleepful state is the one. Is this correct? Where the nafs is taken out of the body, and you're left with the ruh and the qalb. Is that correct?
No. When the nafs leaves during this, we'll come to actually the dream state. We'll talk about dreams. I have another diagram, inshallah, to help you understand that better. But when you enter the sleep state, the heart is also asleep. Like you're going into the realm of dreams. Yeah. What remains behind is the ruh and the body, because the body, the ruh keeps the body functioning when you're asleep. Yeah, we'll talk about that later, inshallah.
We'll talk about the inshallah. Okay, that's fine.
No. Yes. Last question, Zaytun.
Yes, please. It's just my observation, and you talked about epiphany. I think I'll go ahead and use that word today. When you were talking about the mushahada and muraqaba. So muraqaba, from my understanding, is basically mindfulness of what you do at every point in time.
Yes.
Understanding that Allah is watching you, even if you cannot see Him.
Yes.
He sees you at all times.
Yes.
And that made me have to understand the difference between our mindfulness versus the Western mindfulness. In the sense that, because these days, there's no book you don't open, a magazine you don't open, where they don't talk about mindfulness in the West. But I just got to understand, based on what you said now, that there's a huge difference between our mindfulness and their mindfulness, which is, and I may be wrong, which is that our mindfulness is hinged on the absolute truth. So it's Allah, and Allah has advised us to follow Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in order to gain success. So if we follow his path and we are mindful enough to follow the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam path, in almost all that we do, even if we can't do everything, but in all things that we do, then we are guaranteed success, inshallah. But the Western mindfulness is hinged on the nafs, if I may put it that way. What the nafs tells them is good is what is good based on their mindfulness. Or they are basing off their mindfulness on maybe a guru that they respect or someone that has said something that they believe in, and then their nafs tells them, oh, this is right. If that is what their life is all about at that point in time. So there is nothing absolute or divine that their mindfulness is hinged on. It's all about what their nafs wants at the end of it all.
Yeah.
So this is what I just got to.
Yeah, in whatever moment or circumstance that they are in, and whatever they receive at that moment. Inshallah, we're going to talk about the influences, like what sort of influences come to the heart. The nafsiya thoughts, the shaitani thoughts, the malaika, thoughts from the malaika. We'll talk about that. That will make a lot more clear as far as their understanding goes and what influences them to make the mindfulness, what makes them mindful of. Because they'll be mindful of that in this instance, but surprisingly so, they will not apply the same mindfulness in another instance. Anyway, now go ahead, Abu Talha. Last question, inshallah. I think I heard the adhan for Maghrib.
Sorry.
No.
Just popped up in the last second, but you were talking about Sufism and the differentiating between Sufism and the studies that we're doing. So my question is, if you see the Sufi order of, what's his name is, I think, Nazim al-Haqqani and Hisham Kabbani, I think this is the one, just let me see, Naqshbandi Sufi order. So how much truth is there to this Naqshbandi order? Because even Osmani Dargah in US, I think it's in New York, those are I think that's a subsidiary of what the students of Nazim al-Haqqani. So if you see their bayans, because I used to follow them, if you see their bayans, there's not much that they're talking about this world and connecting it with the knowledge of the other world, basically the Majma al-Bahrain, right? The point where two oceans meet. So you can see at least just one ocean that they have. What about the other ocean?
Yeah.
Does that make them incomplete, or do they have the knowledge of them being incomplete, if I'm correct in that sense?
It could be both, in my view. The Naqshbandi order, it's an old order, and in my personal view, that it's actually been corrupted over time. They don't really have the same practice. If you look at some of the literature that goes back to the origins of the founding, they don't have the same integrity as they did. And yeah, I've met a couple of people who are Naqshbandi, and it's too much reliant on the esoteric and don't really bring into account much of this. For the human being, you have to remember, even though your reality is spiritual, you are still in this world, and this is your place of, this is reality for you, right? You need to be in touch and realize the moment that you are existent in. You can't take, I'm a spiritual being, so you don't pay attention to your physical. I mean, Ghazali starts off by explaining the physical first. He talks about the body first and nurturing of the body and taking care of the body. Abu Zayd al-Balqi, the first book he wrote was Sustenance of the Bodies, and then he comes to the sustenance of the soul, right? So you have to examine the outward first, and then now you can go into the inward aspect. Islam itself begins with physical submission. And if you ignore that, then that's unfortunately, this is the kind of, the other extreme that we get. We've got two extremes in our tradition, in our religion, and it's much more pronounced today. In the past, there was this tension, back and forth. So you find some scholars going, this way, that way. But now it's almost a dichotomy. You've either got literalists on one extreme, and then you've got these others who are mystics in the other extreme. And this becomes a problem now because it's very difficult to find a blend of the two. because you need the blend. If you want harmony insofar as your knowing and your soundness of yourself is concerned, you need to find Majma' al-Bahrain. You need to find the blending of the two. It's very difficult. There are very few teachers and few ulama I know who can help you remain in that middle ground. A majority of them will either be on this one extreme or on the other extreme. One extreme is all aqidah, this aqidah, that blah blah blah, everything is bid'ah. The other extreme, they don't know aqidah. It's only bid'ah. And for that, bid'ah is actually doctrine. And that's the unfortunate thing, you see. So it's very difficult to find that balance. You have to be careful with who you interact with also, because some people will say, oh no, I'm from this Zawiya or that one, or I'm Naqshbandi, I'm this. But they're just putting their name as an entry, as a registry, to take their approval or something. But they didn't actually follow the path as it was supposed to be followed. So you'll find a lot of imposters in there as well. Okay.
So, just a follow-up question. I'm sorry, I don't want to take so much more time, but when I hear their lectures and also in person, with the way they talk, it seems like there's some truth to it, because they say spiritually they're learning or practicing, alongside Prophet ﷺ. Eventually, the knowledge that is flowing to them comes from Allah. So my question is, if it really is the way they're saying, are they not knowing that there's also other side, other than esoteric or mystical side of Islam? There's a reality that we live in this world, and the reality of this world that you should know. Because if you really claim that your order goes back to Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani rahmatullahi alayhi, and you're practicing or you're even spiritually in front of Prophet ﷺ and Anbiya or whatever, I don't know, so I won't talk about it. Will they not be guided to this half as well? If they are good in other half, what about this half that you're missing out on?
Well, the problem with
because
that,
knowledge is more.
The problem with that is if you're in this half of the mystical side, the fundamental question remains: how do you know what you know? Like, how did you come to know that? You can't say Allah told me, or I received it in a dream, or this, that, and the other. That cannot be your elaboration or elucidation. I received it in a dream, or I saw it and Allah showed me, and that's the source of my knowledge. Because I pledged bay'ah to my sheikh, and he to his sheikh, and that one to his sheikh, and then he pledged his bay'ah to Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, and so this is how we are getting our knowledge from this channel. This is why we go and do dua to Abdul Qadir al-Jilani's grave. That's not, how do you rationalize it? Where's the sense in that? You see, because you are a physical entity in this world. And here's the thing, if you really say that you're on a spiritual path, what spiritual path is better than the Prophet's path? And if you examine the Prophet's path, he wasn't sitting, 8-9 hours a day doing dhikr and waiting for revelation to come. He was a busy man. He was working, he was training, he was engaging with the others, he was there, he was in the world, he was hadir. He used to sit with the doctors and ask them questions. He used to sit with the farmers and learn from them. Why didn't the Prophet just sit there and wait for Allah to explain everything to him? This is a complete dichotomy. I mean, it's whatever they say is in complete opposition to the Prophet's character and his life and his personification. So I don't know which path they're following. And if you want to examine, if you look at the writings of Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, is nothing like what these people embellish. Nothing. That was a pious individual. You can't have, it's only on this side, and you ignore what's zahiri in front of you. Life is not metaphoric. You can't go through life in allegory. The allegories and metaphors are there just to enable you to facilitate an understanding, but life is literal. It's clear cut. The Sharia is clear cut. If you don't follow that the way it has been given to you, then you've abandoned the foundation of the religion. And if you don't have a foundation, your epistemology will be flawed. Because epistemology requires two things: foundation and coherency of truth. So, what's your foundation? How do you know what you know? Where is the grounding for it? And then number two, what's the coherency of truth? Oh, Allah told me, but there's nobody else who is aware of that. How did Allah tell you? How did that come to you? I saw it in a dream. You're supposed to do this 40 times a day, and then you make that Sharia for your followers. Who made you king of Sharia? Who made you the one in charge, the authority to lay down the law? These people are in delusion, and that's the problem. This is the word for it. It's delusion. This is ghafla, because they are in fantasy. I'm sorry if anybody is in that group and you don't like what I'm saying. The truth is the truth. And I've met with such individuals. The same goes for many other sects and groups out there. Tabligh Jamaat is one of those. Tabligh Jamaat is too literal. And the problem with Tabligh Jamaat is they don't have the foundational sciences. They don't know how to distinguish between what's fadail al-amal and what is wajib, and what is fard and what is sunnah. They'll make up their own rules wherever they feel like it and turn what would be a nafil act or a virtuous act into doctrinal. You have to believe in it, you have to do it. These people, they end up making their own religions at the end of the day. You have to be very careful with them because it's a very slippery slope. And now you're in a world whereby all these beliefs have now been intermingled with secular beliefs. Because none of them, generation after generation, have abandoned the tradition itself, the sciences of our tradition. And remember we said, if you don't learn to philosophize, someone else will philosophize for you. So many of these individuals, their thought processes are guided by all these other phantasms that come out from the godless world. And they'll start talking about all these scientific things and whatnot, and they'll make you feel like, okay, this person is very knowledgeable, but you haven't done the study yourself, so you get carried away with it as well. Anyway, I'm going off on a rant. Let's stop here, inshallah, because I'm being shown the time, and Maghrib is going away for me. So inshallah, we'll connect back next week, inshallah. If I said something to, to offend, that was not my intent, but I'm not going to shy away from the truth, and that's the truth of it. I'm not speaking out of ignorance. I'm speaking when it comes to these kinds of things, I'm speaking out of experience, because I was in search of a teacher as well, and I faced many of these different kinds of characters. Many of them led me astray. Wallah. And I wouldn't want that for anyone else either. It took me a long time to really find my way back and connect back to the path that I had originally intended on taking. And this is by the ni'mah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He enabled me to then find teachers who would guide me, because I know I was sincere in my path of seeking that guidance. Anyway, let's end here, inshallah. Jazakumullahu khairan. Subhanaka wa bihamdika nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا يا مولانا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. بارك الله فيكم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. جزاكم الله خيرا إن شاء الله. We'll see you everyone next week. نعم جزاك الله.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
عليكم السلام ورحمة الله. جزاك الله خيرا.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.